Hello, good to see you again. Welcome to Block 5, Fraction, Decimal, and Percentage Equivalence, Lesson 6. I'll share my screen. So, in your previous lesson, you learned how to represent fifths and quarters using 100 squares. In today's lesson, we're going to focus on being able to convert fractions and decimals, but representing eighths and thousandths, which is something that students find challenging. Before we start, I want to appeal to you to support our mission to educate the global population of children uh, in learning mathematics at no cost. So please, to do that, remember to click on the like button for the videos, click on the subscribe button, and remember to click the notification bell so that whenever new videos are produced, you will get notified. Before we start, I would like you to answer these retrieval practice questions. It should take you about 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered the retrieval practice questions, here are the answers. So we know that 3/10 is 30 hundredths. So if we, just a minute, we know that 3/10 is 30 hundredths. So if we add 30 hundredths to 37 hundredths, we will have, so let's write. So this is 30 hundredths. So if we, so that's 30 hundredths. So if we add 30 hundredths to 7 hundredths, that's 37 hundredths. And we can represent that as a decimal, and that will be 0.37. Okay, next we were asked to write down the fraction and decimal shaded in each 100 square. Here we can see that we have 7 whole columns of the 100 square. Each of these columns comprises of 10 squares. So 7 of them will be 70 and then 3. So that is 73 hundredths. Of course, if we write it as a decimal, that will be 0.73. Here, we're asked to represent this as a fraction. So here, we're going to have it as 50 hundredths because we have 50 squares out of the 100 squares. And then as a decimal, that will be, if we simplify, that will be 5/10. And then recognize that it is half of the 100 squares. So that is a half. And which is the same thing as 0.5. Okay, let's do some new learning. If I ask you to represent this as a fraction, you would say, oh, we just have one square out of 100 squares, so this is 1/100th. However, if I ask you to represent it as thousandths, what would you do? Have a think. Well, we know that this 1/100th is 0.01. But as a thousandth, when we split each of these squares into 10 squares, you will see that now we have 10 squares, but 10 squares of 100 lots of them will be 1,000. So this, which is 1/100th, is equivalent to 10 1,000th. Also notice that we can simply see the relationship between this and this, because if we make the numerator, that's what we call the top part of a fraction, 10 times bigger, we have to make the denominator, which is what we call the bottom part of a fraction, 10 times bigger. So that is 1,000, and that will be a tenth. Okay, what about this one? How would we represent this as a thousandth? Well, if we know it's 0 0.1, 1/10 is 0 0.1. If we split each of the little squares into 10 parts, it means this part that is shaded is 10 lots of 10, which is 100th. So 1/10 is the same thing as 100th, 100 1,000th. So 100 over 1,000. Notice also that to make it a thousandth, we could have multiplied the denominator by 100, which will make it 1,000, and we also multiply the numerator by 100. So that is another way of thinking about the problem. What about this one? How do we represent, have a think, how do we represent this as fraction? Now, notice that just looking at it as 100 squares, just looking at it as 100 squares, we have 4 columns of the 100 squares shaded, which is 40, and we have 3. So representing it as 100 squares, or out of 100, this is 43 100th. But if we split to represent it as a thousandth, is the same thing as splitting each of the squares into 10 parts. So we now have 430, because you have 43 lots of 10. So we have 430 over 1,000, which is equivalent to 43 hundredths. Another way to think about it, remember, is the same thing as making the numerator 10 times bigger and making the numerator 10 times bigger, which gets it to a thousandth. What about this one? Which diagrams have 1/8 shaded? Have a think. All right. Assuming you've paused the video and you've worked through this, let's see. This one is 1/10. 1/8. You can see we have one square shaded out of 8 little squares. So this is 1/8. What about this one? This one is also 1/8, right? It's very obvious. You can see we have one square shaded out of 8 squares. What about this one? You can see that we have 8 triangles, okay, although their orientation is different, but we have one of them shaded out of 8. So that is 1/8. What about this one? Notice that this part here is a half. So it's a half of this square. Notice that the other part is a half. But this horizontal line has split this half into 2 equal parts. So it means this bit here, a half of a half, is a quarter. So it means this bit here is a quarter. So let's go back. So let's write. So this is a half. This is a half. This now becomes a quarter, because if this bit here is a half, is then divided into 2 equal parts, that's a quarter. But notice again that the quarter has been split into 2 parts. So this is 1/8. So really, this part is 1/8, which is being shaded. But looking at the last one, we can see that we have 9 squares, but we have one shaded. So this is not 1/8, this is 1/9. So that's not part of the 1/8 shapes that we have around. It's your turn to have a practice. Pause the video and answer the questions that follow. Pause the video and answer question 1 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 1, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Here you were asked, use the 1,000 square to complete the equivalent fractions. Well, looking at this, you can see that a half will be 500. You can see these are 500 squares, 500 out of 1,000. A quarter will be 250, and 1/8 will be half of that, which is 125 over 1,000. Next, you were asked, use your answer to part C to write 1/8 as a decimal. Of course, 125 divided by 1,000 will be 0.125. Next, you were asked question 2. Pause the video and answer questions 2 and 3 in 4 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 1 and 2, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Let's move this out of the way. Okay, so here you're asked to complete the statements. A quarter is half of a half, so 1/8 is half of a quarter. All right, so assuming you've paused the video, here are the answers. So a quarter is half of a half, so 1/8 is a half of a quarter. Next, 0.25, you can see here is a quarter. 0.75 is 3 quarters. You can see that 0.75 is 3 lots of 0.25. Okay, 0.75 is 3 lots of 0.25. Why? 0.25 plus 0.25 is 0.5. Then if you add another 0.25, you will have 0.75. 0.25 is the same thing as 2/8. All right. See 2/8? Yes. Why? 0.25 is a quarter, right? So 0.25 is a quarter. 0.25 is a quarter. So if we have here being 8, it means we have to double the numerator as well. So that's 2/8. 0.75, we know 0.25 is a quarter. We know 3 lots of that will be 0.75. We know 0.75 is 3 quarters. Let me use this one. Let's switch to this pen. So we know 0.75 is 3 quarters. So if this is 8, it means we have to double that. And that's why that should be 6/8. Okay. All right. So let's rub this off. Pen is malfunctioning. Let's see. All right. So let's move it in place. Okay, let's get that. Okay. Next one, we were asked, write. You were asked, write um, fraction. What fraction of the thousand square is shaded? So here, although it's shaded on the other parts, we can see that this is 150. So 150 parts is shaded, and this is 720. Okay, let's move on. All right. Don't want the laser pointer. Pen is playing up today. Okay. All right. Next, have a go at question 4 in 2 minutes. Okay, assuming you've answered question 4, here are the answers. So here's question 4. Have a go at question 4 in 2 minutes. So assuming you've answered question 4, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So here you were asked to use the thousand square to help you answer the questions. So how many thousands are equal to 200s? So 200s. So let's discuss this one. So 200s. Let's get a pen. So 200s will be 2 out of 100. Okay. Now, if we make this 10 times bigger, we have to make this 10 times bigger. So it's a bit like taking one of the squares of the 100 squares and splitting it into 10 parts. So that will be 20 thousandths, 20 out over 1,000. And then here, how many thousands are equal to 2 tenths? 2 tenths is 20 hundredths. All right. Now imagine splitting one of those squares into 10 equal parts. It means 20 hundredths will become 200 over 1,000. So it's a bit like making this 100 times bigger. You have to make that denominator 100 times bigger. So you have 200ths. Let's erase this. Okay. What fraction of this thousand square is shaded? So if I ask you, what fraction of the thousand square is shaded? Well, you don't have to start counting. What if we rearrange it? You would see that it's 250. So it's 250 because you can see the number of squares that are shaded. So we have 25 squares shaded. If we split each of those 25 squares into 10 parts, it means 25 becomes 250, and the 100 squares is actually 1,000, because we've just made 25 hundredths into thousandths. So it's 250 over 1,000. Now, have you noticed if we rearrange it, it becomes like this? Also, notice the decimal equivalent, that it is 0.25. Okay? And it's the same thing as a quarter. Because why? You can see that it's a quarter of the 1,000 square or the 100 squares if we don't have it split into 10 equal parts. Here we have a number line. How do we represent these? Now, we can represent this as 1 8, 2 8, 3 8, 4 8, so on and so forth. Why? Because we have 8 intervals. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 8 intervals. So if we want to label this number line, on which is the intervals, is going to be 1 8, 2 8, 3 8, all the way to 7 8. But what about as a thousand? How do we do this? Well, 1 is 1,000 thousandths. Yeah, it's 1,000 over 1,000. Therefore, if we split these thousands, so remember when we did our lesson in intervals, if we want to split 1,000 into these 8 intervals, if we want to divide 1,000 into 8 equal intervals, we'll have to divide 1,000 by 8. That will be 125. So it means each of these interval is worth 125. So if we start to write, the first one will be 125 over 1,000, and then we can do 125 increments to complete the intervals. But where would 110 go on the number line? Have a think. Well, if you think about it, 110, if we think about it in terms of a thousandth equivalent, 1/10 will be the same thing as 100 over 1,000. Okay, so the best place to place it will be close to 125, which is that location. So 1/10, the equivalent of 1/10 is the equivalent of 1/10 is, so let's write, so 1/10 is the same thing as 100. Pen is moving. Is the same thing as 100 over 1,000. Okay, so another way to think about it is you simply multiply the numerator by 100 and the denominator by 100. Okay, let's erase that and move on. Okay, it's now time for you to have a go at the rest of the questions. Pause the video and answer question 5 in 2 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and you've answered question 5, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. So here you were simply asked to complete the statements, and here are the answers. So by now, you should know that from moving from 1,000 to 100, you're dividing by 10. Then moving from 100 to tenth as denominator, we're dividing each, either we're dividing the numerator and the denominator by 10. So if that is 30, that has to be 3, and that's 10, and then that's the decimal equivalent. And that's how we produced these answers. Pause the video and answer questions 6 and 7 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and answered the questions, here are the answers. Let's discuss them. Question 6, you were asked, Annie is trying to work out 3/8 as a decimal. You were asked to explain why, 3/8 is equal to you were asked to explain. So she says 3/8 is equal to 375 over 1000, which is 375. Explain and correct Annie's error. Well, it is equal to 375 thousandths, which is 0.375. So it's not 375. Okay. All right. Why? Let's explore this a bit more. So we know that 1/8 is 125 thousandths. So 3/8 will be 3 lots of that. Okay. So 3 lots, 125 plus 125 is 250. 250 plus 125 will be 375. So it's 375 thousandths, not 375. Next, you told, given that 1/8 is 0.125, you should complete the table. And here are the answers. So 0.125, twice of that, which is 2/8, will be 0.25. And we can just add 0.125, so on and so forth until we get to the end of this value here. Pause the video and answer questions 8 and 9 in 3 minutes. Assuming you've paused the video and answered questions 8 and 9, here are the answers. So for question 8, here are the answers. So you are asked to write the fractions in descending order. Now, to be able to write the fractions in descending order, I'm sure you would have looked at the fractions and either written them in thousands equivalents, and then that would enable you to write them in ascending order, in descending order. And here are the answers. So writing them in thousands equivalents would make it easier to write them in to put them in descending order. Here it's again using our interval technique. We're asked to find out what that value would be. So what is the fraction at point A? So we're told that that's 3/8. Distance between there is 3/8. We know we can represent 0. We know 1/8 is 0.125. All right. And 2/8 will be a quarter. So that's 2/8. So if you add 2/8, all right, that interval is 3/8. So 2/8 plus 3/8 will be 5/8. So that should be 6/8. Okay. All right. You can see 5/8 there. Yeah. So let me write what I said just now. So this is 2/8 because we know this is 0.125. Okay. And then this here is 0.25, which is 2/8. All right. So 2/8 plus 3/8 will be 5/8. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. And then for Question B, you were asked to label 6/8 in the approximate location, and that should be there, right there, just one interval away from A. Question 10, pause the video and answer question 10. Assuming you've paused the video and answered question 10, here are the answers. You were told to circle all the fractions that cannot be simplified to quarters. All right? So these are fractions that we cannot simplify to quarters. And then what do you notice about all of the circled fractions? The numerators are odd. That's why we cannot simplify them at this stage. All right? That brings us to the end of our lesson. So what have we learned so far? So far, we have learned that so far we have learned that to be able to represent eighths and thousandths, you need to realize that if you can represent the fraction already as hundredths, then you can simply scale it up by either multiplying the numerator by 10 and the denominator by 10, or multiply the numerator by 100 and the denominator by 100, or you can make use of the fact, when you're talking about eighths, you can make use of the fact that 1/8 is 0.125 or 125 over 1,000. So 1/8 represents 125 little squares. And then you can scale it up or scale it down depending on the eighths you want to represent. So for example, if you're looking for 5/8, you know that 1/8 is 125 over 1,000. You can multiply 125 by 5 and then multiply and then leave the denominator as 1,000 because it's already 1,000 anyway. That will give you 5/8. Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of our lesson. Until next time, bye-bye.